Okay, welcome into the Hot Shop, everyone. I'll be talking about who we have on the floor and what we'll have going on. So we're just getting started again. We actually have a visiting artist today. That's the slideshow you've been seeing on the screen, just some previous works of his. His name's Lonnie Holley. And he's been working on these mixed media sculptures using found objects throughout the day today, and this is what he does. So we have an example right here. This one was made this morning out of found objects within the hot shop. And I can explain some of these pieces. It's kind of interesting. He even passed it around earlier, so if you would like to see these pieces, I can show them to you, as well as this cup that was made yesterday. But this is a piece of kiln brick from like the inside of one of our furnaces. This is a piece of newspaper, which we actually use to like shape the glass with our hands. And then this bag is filled with, I think, just like broken or scrap glass from the hot shop during the process from yesterday. He collected some of these found objects and then incorporated them into this piece. So this is a really good example of what he does. Now, as for the hot shop itself, we're going to be making a lot of blown pieces that he's eventually going to use as like a base or starting point for some of these mixed media sculptures on a later date. So for example, yesterday, and hopefully you'll get to see some of these later on, they're still in that box over there. They made some pieces like a cylinder with like holes in it or marbles on the outside that you can attach and run things through. A lot of copper wiring is used to hold all of these found objects together. And yeah, that's Lonnie up in the front, sitting on the chair. He's going to be continuing to work on those sculptures as we work in the hot shop. And we're going to start with just a little bit of prep work, technically. So we're going to be making a color cup, basically just a cup of colored glass that we eventually use as the color for our entire piece, whether it be a bowl or another one of our cylinders, which we've seen 2 created today. Oh yeah, and then this cup was made yesterday. This one I feel like is safe to pass around, but this has some copper wire embedded in the surface of it and then a blown glass bubble that was attached over top of it to look like saran wrap. So it is supposed to look like saran wrap. Now, Lonnie's visiting all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. This is where he lives and works on these various pieces. And he's here for a full week residency, so he'll be here all the way through Sunday. Yeah. And then this piece in the front here, Lonnie wanted to reiterate that this is copper, aluminum, and glass sculpture. I will say it's pretty rare for artists that come through to pass their work around for you guys to see, so this is a special little treat for us all. I often don't even handle the glass myself. So we've got a good view of the right bench on the screen. And for those who have been watching this process so far, I'll describe what we've done. So we had a small clear bubble on the end of one of our pipes. And then on the end of a second pipe, we had a decent sized chunk of a piece of colored glass like this. Maybe like a third or a fourth of this bar. This is a lot. We melt it down on the end of a second pipe, and then we drop it on top of that clear bubble. And that's going to essentially form a layer of color over the entire finished piece. Thanks. Yeah, that process is called a color drop or a color overlay. We get the colors shipped in that bar form. We don't actually make the colored glass ourselves. So we can blow this out eventually once we have enough material to work with and turn it into that cup of colored glass that I described earlier. Yeah, so when we have visiting artists that come through, the visiting artists can come through on their own, or they can bring in a team if they wish, and beyond. So today we have the visiting artist, again, Lonnie, and then we also have part of our resident hot shop team, or we have 3 members of our hot shop team. They work here for the museum. And so that means that anyone that comes through, they technically don't even have to work with glass on a day-to-day basis. They don't have to know how to work with glass. Instead, they bring in their designs, their ideas, or they incorporate pieces into the glass. Or like you'll see later on, Lonnie actually designs some powdered glass that we apply to the surface of the piece. So kind of combining these things. But yeah, these guys will bring those ideas to life. So we have a mixed group on the floor. And we've been using these on our pieces here and there as well. This is a small marble of clear glass at the center bench that we're working on. And the way that we make these perfectly round is we actually have something called a ring tool. It's just a kind of self-explanatory. You can see I'm using it now. It's a tool with a little ring on the end. This is dipped in beeswax, or we apply beeswax to it to prevent it from sticking to the glass. So once we had our layer of color, it's just a matter of building up layers of clear glass over top of that to just start getting enough mass to blow out and actually turn into that cup. Now this bubble at the center bench is being blown out into its full size, which again, this will be kind of a straight-walled cup with a rounded bottom. We'll eventually use this later on by stuffing more glass inside of it to pick it up again. And for those who are just joining in, I will do another reintroduction as to who we have here and what we have going on. Just kind of catch you guys up a little bit. So we have a visiting artist, Lonnie Holley. He's the one up in the front right here working on this sculpture. This is made of copper wiring, aluminum wiring, and then also some glass. And what Lonnie does is he will use found objects, like this finished piece right here, that he just collects as he goes around his day-to-day life. And then he will incorporate them into mixed media sculptures. So with the pieces of blown glass that we're making in the hot shop for this residency, these will be kind of the starting point or the base for some of these mixed media sculptures. So he's going to build upon them. Now, this piece right here, he made this morning. He finished it in a couple of hours or so. And this is using a bunch of pieces that were found in the hot shop. So this is a piece of kiln shelf at the very base that's like lining the inside of one of our furnaces. And then this is a piece of newspaper, which that's actually exactly what Ben has been using at the center bench. That pad is just folded up newspaper. And in this bag, we have some crushed kind of leftover glass. So tons of different found objects from this environment, made in this environment, and then put on display in this environment. So kind of cool. And again, Lonnie is very multi-talented. He also makes art, like music. And he went and he had a show in Seattle last night before continuing his residency here. So he's bouncing all over the place. And on the last day of a visiting artist residency, so Sunday coming up, we'll have an artist lecture or an artist talk where Lonnie will come up in the front. He'll take the mic and he'll talk about his inspirations and his background and how we got here, how we got to making these pieces of art. And feel free to ask any questions that you guys have, whether it's about the glass or about our visiting artists. I usually kind of follow the process along as they blow the piece of glass. Now, once we have something blown out, and we're happy with the shape, it's the lower half of the piece. You could think of the lower half as furthest away from the pipe. We attach a second pipe, let that connection set up for a second, and then we break the entire bubble off of that first pipe that we originally blew it on. And the idea behind this is just to flip the orientation of the piece or to get access to another part of the piece. We have to do this for a lot of different pieces. And now we can open this up from that small opening we just created, flare it out into our cup. And this is going to end up blue, so your eyes do not deceive you. Yeah, all this equipment along the wall, like what we're using to reheat the glass, where we're getting the molten glass to begin with, this is all running between 21 and 2300 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's all running off of natural gas. And we will have this torch lit up at some point right behind the bench here with the red handle that's also running off of natural gas, so mostly natural gas. Now this has been opened up to pretty much its full size. Eventually we will set this aside to stay warm, and then we'll move on to the next step. So when we have a piece that cools down to room temperature, we have to heat it up really slowly back up to about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or slow-ish. And then we can heat it up a little bit further from there and rework it. But you can rework a piece of glass as many times as you want and reheat a piece of glass as many times as you want. There's not really a limitation like metal, where metal will get more brittle or something structurally not happy. But glass is pretty safe to work with like that. But yeah, we just have to heat it slowly and cool it slowly. So for those who joined in more recently, I'm going to give just a full introduction for you guys real quick, if you don't mind. But this is our visiting artist in the front. His name's Lonnie Holley. And he's here for a full residency all the way through Sunday. And this is one of his mixed media sculptures. So this is copper wiring, aluminum wiring, and some glass that's been found in the hot shop. He makes mixed media sculptures out of found objects, like this piece right here. And he's actually going to be using the blown glass pieces that we're making in the hot shop as like a base to kind of build off of and create some of these found object sculptures. And you're welcome to take a closer look at these, by the way. I have been passing them around in the crowd throughout the day today so you guys can see them. And yeah, so he's making a sculpture. I think that this one is for one of the larger blown pieces that we've already finished. We've made some cylinders so far, yesterday and today, and then we also made one big blown glass bowl that I saw is kind of hidden inside of that black box on the left. So yeah, we'll eventually be incorporating this into some of the glass art. So those two metal blades that Ben has been using, those are called the jacks, and we've been using them basically start to finish. But we just did something interesting with them that I wanted to point out. We ran them through a solid block of beeswax behind the bench, just briefly. We want these to glide across the surface of the glass with no chance of sticking or scraping, so we coat them in beeswax. It's one of the few tools that we do that. So this is knocked off into this little box in the front, which we keep at about 900 degrees Fahrenheit. And I don't know if we'll use this later today or tomorrow, but at some point we're going to turn it so that the cup is facing upwards towards the sky. It'll be sitting in a metal ring. And then we'll bring over another bubble of glass and we'll stuff it inside of the cup and kind of pick the cup up on the outside of that bubble. That's how we use those. And we have another one of those that we created this morning sitting inside of this silver box and just kind of waiting to be used, I believe. So I think we'll be using that one first. Ooh, and can I have a view of Lonnie working on his design in the back? Yeah, okay, so I don't know if this is already on the screen, I didn't check. But up on the screen, we can see Lonnie working in the back. This is some powdered colored glass that we laid out. They get this shipped in these bags, so we don't make any of the colored glass ourselves, so we get it shipped in. We lay this out, and Lonnie is going to draw a design in this, which we eventually bring our bubble of colored glass over, and then we roll it over top of this design to pick it up off the table. Exactly, yeah. This is the tank with the closed door specifically got a crucible inside of it, and it's filled with clear molten glass. That crucible can hold up to about 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. So the initial bubble is actually the hardest stage of blowing. That's when you need to use the most pressure. So instead of just blowing as hard as we can, we usually actually blow and then we immediately cap it with our thumb, keeping that air pressure inside. And then sometimes we'll even tilt the pipe up, but basically that pressure will burst that initial bubble into the glass. And then from there, it's actually pretty easy to just blow lightly and it'll expand like a balloon. It's even easier than blowing in a balloon, usually. So I'm not sure if they did this, but usually to break pieces off, we have to create some sort of thermal shock in the connection to crack the connection just enough that it'll pop off like that. And so at the bench, he probably applied a little bit of water to the end of the pipe before he came over here and then tapped the pipe. So the water thermally shocks, cracks the glass, and then tapping the pipe sends a vibration to the weakest point in the piece, which is usually always the place where we've put the water, and then it just pops the piece off. Yeah, so when it comes to the finished pieces in the hot shop, I think that we usually get to see the pieces the next day. So technically you could tune into the live stream sometime tomorrow afternoon or maybe even the day after that. But for example, those were all made yesterday that are sitting inside that box there. I think they're just a little too hot to touch still, but you can see a large cylinder in there. That was made yesterday and just cooled down enough that we were able to open up the doors and take a peek earlier at about noon. But when it comes to the finished pieces, we don't necessarily post pictures of them or anything, sadly. So I always try to recommend maybe tuning into the live stream, and then sometimes they do a pan of the whole like front of the hot shop, and we have a lot of finished pieces that we tend to put on these front tables right here. Yeah. And then you can also check out our visiting artists' social medias as well. That's a really good place to see finished products. Which, if we could we have the slideshow for our visiting artists, please? Yeah, could we have our visiting artist slideshow, please? Thank you. So this slideshow will play, and one of the slides actually has Lonnie's information, like social media information on it, his ats. Yeah, right there. So LonnieHolley.com or Lonnie Holley's universe. I know the closed captioning doesn't really capture everything I say to a T, but so if we were to let this piece of glass cool, it's probably going to cool at the same rate as the finished pieces as well, maybe about 12 hours of cooling. We have to cool it for that long to properly cool it and make sure it doesn't break. But if we were to just set it out at room temperature, it would cool down in a few minutes or so, 10 minutes, depending on the thickness of the glass. But if we do that, then it'll crack from thermal shock. So that's why we cool it very slowly. So with our glass right here at the center bench, this is of course still just clear glass all the way through. Any color you see is just from the glass being so hot that it's radiating light as well as heat, glowing like lava. Now eventually this will be reshaped, blown out a little bit into kind of this longer tapered shape, almost like a bullet. We're going to eventually stuff that glass inside of one of these cups that we made earlier. Yes, so this hot shop in particular, we usually only have professionals working on the floor. And so the visiting artists that come through, sometimes they actually don't work with glass very much or maybe have never worked with glass. Lonnie has worked with glass a little bit, and this is apparently like his 6th piece of glass or so, you know. But when it comes to the team working with the glass at the center bench, laying their hands on it. These guys work for the museum, and they help visiting artists come through, bring all their designs and their visions to life. So these guys have been working with glass for a while. Ben sitting at the bench. I always point out the person sitting at the bench. He has like 35 years experience working with glass. Just very professional. So everything's running around the same temperature, but what we're working with right here is just to reheat the glass and make it malleable again. And then the tank with the closed door behind Nick over there, that's actually what's holding the molten glass inside of it. So there's a crucible filled with molten glass. Oh yeah, and then this torch, it looks like we're gonna start using this more frequently too. This is running around the same temperature again, but the torch we use to heat up sections of glass at a time instead of heating up the entire thing overall like we've been doing. So pinpointing heat. Yeah, and so the one at the end is just the same as this right here. It's just a little bit of a smaller diameter. And so we usually will have 2 benches lit up just so that we can do additional things kind of on the side bench, like prepare a little bit of glass that we bring over and attach, like the handle of a pitcher, or maybe we would reheat the marble we made earlier and then attach that to the side of the piece, which that's actually exactly what we did for one of our pieces earlier today. Yeah, at the moment, we don't need that side bench, but we use it throughout the day. Yes, exactly. So this bubble right here is eventually going to be stuffed inside of a cup of glass. Why is it? Oh, so the best way to describe it is when we start a piece, the color goes on to just this small little clear bubble like this, and then we have to build layer upon layer of clear glass over top of it. And then when we do that, that makes the piece bigger, of course, but the color is all the way underneath those layers of clear. So when we make a cup of colored glass, and then we make a large bubble of clear and stuff it inside of the colored glass, the color is closer to the surface in the final product, and it makes it look more like something that's all colored like this, instead of having like a little layer of separation on the outside, that little layer of clear. You can actually see that little layer of clear hovering on the outside of some pieces if it's thick enough. I think it's mostly for that reason. And this is the first blown piece that was made yesterday, other than this cup right here that's being put out on the front pedestal. So feel free to take a closer look at any of these pieces. You can come down and take pictures. And these 2 pieces we've been passing around throughout the day so you guys can get a closer look. So just let me know. So, I mean, it is what you see. It's like a bowl, but there are some holes in the sides of it. And this is strategic. So this is eventually going to be used as like the base or the starting point to one of these mixed media sculptures, kind of like what you see right here or what you see Lonnie working on in the front. And the holes, I'm assuming they're going to run something through or connect something to, instead of it just being completely solid piece all the way around. Then they have to kind of put things inside and balance things on it, but with the hole they can actually run things through it. Oh yeah, so we have a bunch of colors laid out on this front table right here, in bar form and in powder form like this. We get the colors shipped in. It's different metals, minerals, and oxides mixed into the glass. So for example, one of the more expensive colors that we use would be gold chloride. It actually comes from gold, and it creates a pinkish, purplish, reddish color, depending on the exact mixture. It's a really pretty color. Too bad it's so expensive. And then for some yellows, reds, and oranges, we would use a cadmium base. Those are all, or tend to be, opaque yellows, reds, oranges. So just a couple of examples. And then as for using these, the powder is easier to picture, right? You just kind of roll the molten glass inside of it or pick it up on the outside of molten glass. But with the color bar, this is what we started with for the yellow cup at the center bench. Not literally this piece of glass, but this is called color bar. We break a section of it off, we melt it down, and then we layer it on top of or within a bubble of glass. Kind of like a chocolate shell on an ice cream scoop. Oh no, they're going to be added together. Yeah, so that's why we shaped this bubble right here into kind of this longer tapered shape. We want it to fit properly inside of this yellow cup of glass, which this is yellow. I know it looks bright orange, but it's just because it's so hot right now. It's turning a different color. Yeah, it's going to be like a really light yellow, almost like a banana yellow or something. Yeah. Oh, that's the yellow right there? Oh, okay. I would call this more like taxi cab yellow then. Yeah, this is like, yeah, right here. So we're just waiting for that clear glass to cool down a little bit so that we essentially have a solid core within this next layer of clear that we get. Oh, and any glass that we drip off into this bucket, this is designated for clear glass only. So we eventually just crush it up and throw it back into the furnace and reuse it. Oh, and this is a pipe cooler. Don't worry, you're not missing anything crazy. Just a trough of water that we set the pipe into. So we break this cup off of the pipe, we set it upright into this heated ring, and then we just drop this clear bubble of glass inside. So there, just like that, we have a layer of yellow colored glass close to the surface of our piece, and we'll start working with this a little bit further, and eventually we will be taking this entire bubble and rolling it over that pattern that Lonnie created earlier out of the powdered colored glass. So I was trying to describe it earlier, but the reason we do this process right here, picking up the colored cup on the outside, is basically just to have the color closer to the surface of the piece, but we need this amount of glass to make the size of piece that we want. Yeah, more material equals bigger piece, if we want it to be bigger. Otherwise, we just end up with super thick walls. So for these finished pieces, actually, could we just have the slide that has Lonnie's social medias on it? I was trying to read out the social media tags earlier, but the closed captioning was messing up, so here they are right here for anyone that's interested in looking at more of Lonnie's work or possibly seeing some of these pieces posted there as well. Sometimes the Museum of Glass Instagram will post pictures or videos of in-process pieces, but I would say it's a little bit rare. So you either want to come back in or watch the live stream or go to the artist's social media. Thank you. Yeah, glass blowing is definitely very technically challenging. So the way that a lot of people get started will differ from one another. So for example, some of the people you ask that work here, they maybe got started when they took an elective class in college and they were like, oh, this is really cool. And then they just kind of continue doing it. Some of them worked in proximity to, started working at a hot shop, doing something like filling the furnace with glass in the middle of the night and then kind of working their way up and learning more. I know for myself and some others that are local here, we learned glass blowing through the youth program in Tacoma through Hilltop Artists. So I started in high school working with glass. It's called Hilltop Artists. And then some other people, maybe get taken under someone's wing if they're really interested, and then they learn through them. So it really just depends. It's an art. So a lot of artists, they don't necessarily go to college for it, per se. Some people do. Yeah, there are apprenticeships, internships, all sorts of ways to get in. It is difficult to find positions like that, though, because glass blowing is, one, very expensive, and two, it's pretty niche. So the camera wasn't quite able to capture it because it was in the back, but we picked up our design. And for those who weren't here in the very beginning, earlier we laid out 3 rows of colored powdered glass, which we have in these bags up in the front here. And we just get this color shipped in. We don't make any of it or anything. We lay it out. And then Lonnie, our visiting artist up in the front, he took things like paintbrush, pencil, spoon, and he would kind of dig through, create these lines in that powdered glass on the table, creating empty spaces or void spaces. So when we roll this color up on the bubble, we end up with a pattern, very distinct pattern. And then from there, we've melted that in. We've started to reshape the bubble using the marver, that metal table. We're just rolling it across it. Oh yeah, you're not going to see the colors very well on the piece when we're working with it. You'll have to wait for it to cool down overnight to be able to see the true colors of the glass. Like this right here, it looks like we had a blue base, maybe, and then we applied different powdered colors of glass. There's a lot of yellow on this, lots of splashes of yellow. So now we let this cool down one more time, and we're going to gather one layer of clear over top of all of this color, kind of seal it in, make sure that the color's not directly on the surface of the piece. This is something that a lot of people don't know, but when you take this torch right here and you torch the surface of the glass, if there's color on the surface of the glass, different colors come from different metals, minerals, and oxides. Those metals get pulled to the surface of the piece, and you end up with different colors, which these are not ideal for what we're trying to make right now. Sometimes we purposefully do that, not for this piece. So we're going to clear coat it. So this one in particular, I'm not sure if it's being made for a piece that has already been made, like the cylinder from yesterday, for example, or a cylinder. We made 2 cylinders earlier today. So this could go inside of one of these or be applied to it in some sort of way. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of these pieces, we won't see him finish them off completely with his wire wrapping and with his found objects. I'm sure he's going to take a lot of them back home to his studio in Georgia and then, yeah, continue working there. So we gathered clear glass again, and we're rolling this in a block, which is basically a wooden spoon-shaped tool. It's usually carved out of a fruit wood like cherry wood, and it's kept in water constantly to keep it saturated. Just kind of smoothing and evening this glass out before we start blowing it out. And this should be all the glass we need for this project, I believe. Oh, and there's the cylinder they made yesterday. So this one has a black base with a blue and white powder design over the top of it. So this is kind of how the designs can turn out. And something that I think would be interesting to point out again are the fact that our visiting artist is using found objects in a lot of his work, or all of his work. So these pieces of glass that are wrapped and hanging within this structure up in the front that Lonnie's created, these are scraps of glass from, I think, yesterday's projects, which is why we still have the same pops of blue as some of the pieces that were made yesterday. So he's repurposing some of these scraps, or what would have otherwise been scraps. Yeah, a lot of people ask about glass waste, and usually we do have to throw mixed like color and clear glass away. But every once in a while, there are artists that take it and they slump it, or they turn it into something further, like Lonnie's doing here. I hardly ever see anyone burn themselves in here. And it's just the fact that they're professionals and they're really used to this environment. And the people that work here specifically, they work doing tons of different things. They're not like a production line, so they don't just make cups over and over again or anything. They are used to really stretching the boundaries of glass. They make big things, they make tiny, really intricate things. And any burns that I do see are usually very like, just touch something for a split second and it's just very superficial. It's never anything that bad. So now we're starting to blow this out. Ben is guiding which way it blows out and kind of controlling the shape with the newspapers. So this divot that was carved in with those two metal blades, this is a really important step. It's called the jack line. Basically, it's a purposeful weak point, and we will eventually break the entire piece off from there. Yeah, isn't it crazy that at the beginning of the process we had this much glass and then now we're making a piece this big? Yes, exactly. So this isn't even our biggest like chamber for heating up the glass. We have this one kind of hidden behind this metal shield to the left of it. And we've made pieces up to 26 inches across. Yeah, very big pieces of glass. Because you can open up all of those doors until it's basically just a barrel shape that you just stick the piece inside of. Now, the only consequence of that is every time we open the doors, more heat will escape. So it cools down. And now we're using this setup on the table. This is quite simply a wooden board with wet newspaper laid over top of it. And the reason we use this is to basically apply pressure to the entire wall of the piece all at the same time, like all the way across. So this makes a perfect cylinder or a perfect cone, basically anything that needs that straight wall. Yeah, exactly. So kind of behind the scenes, we cap the end of the pipe because the pipe works both ways like a straw. We can blow air into the piece, but if we're applying pressure to the piece, air can also escape. So we're preventing it from escaping and we're keeping the shape by capping the end of the pipe. Yeah, I haven't seen them use these yet today, but we have some rollers set up at the bench now. So instead of rolling the piece back and forth across the bench, we can quickly turn them in one spot, making the piece completely symmetrical. We're flattening the bottom down with a wooden board. This is made out of also cherry wood, just like that tool I mentioned earlier. Yeah, the powder. So we still have it laid out. It looks like it's orange, black, and green. Yeah. And this is all on a yellow base, by the way. So this is a really important step right here. We attached a pipe onto the center of the bottom of the piece. We're going to let this connection set up for a second, and then we're going to break the piece off of its first pipe, and it'll just be attached to this second pipe. And they let the glass get a little bit cold to do this before applying some water to that connecting point, and then tapping the pipe to send a vibration to those cracks. And just like that, we've transferred it to a different pipe. And now we can start working on the top end of this piece. So as they start to open this up a little bit, over on the right bench, we prepare a bit of a second color, or just a different color in general. We're going to heat this up, eventually bring it over, and then attach it to just the opening of the piece, creating something called a lip wrap. So we're going to have a pop of color just around the rim of the piece. And sadly, neither of the pieces from yesterday have that example, but both of the pieces we made earlier today have a lip wrap on them as well. So with these pieces that we're working on, we're basically just making blown pieces one by one, and we set them aside to cool down. Oh yeah, the one right there that she has. Yeah, Emily's heating up a little bit of glass that she'll attach. It's not like a piece of glass necessarily that we're attaching. It's not like we're attaching a marble or anything like that. It's just like attaching this glass as in we're going to apply it or use it in some sort of way. So we bring this bit of color over, we just lightly touch it down onto the opening of the piece, and then as we turn the pipe, it's going to follow all the way around and create our lip wrap. And this uses a decent amount of color because when we open this up, that glass is going to get stretched thinner and thinner. We still want it to have a nice thick pop of color at the top. And just to give a quick introduction for anyone that's joined in more recently, starting from the top, we have a visiting artist here today, and his name's Lonnie Holley. He's the one sitting up in the front working on this large sculpture, and he's also made this piece right here on the front pedestal this morning. Yeah, you're welcome to take a closer look at it, or I can even pass it out into the crowd. It's been a while since I've done that, and you guys could get a closer look, but this is using found objects in the hot shop. So this right here at the base is a piece of kiln brick, which lines the inside of our furnaces. And then right here, this is a piece of newspaper, which we use to shape this piece of glass. And this at the top is a bag that is filled with crushed pieces of glass, like scrap glass, collected from the process yesterday where they blew their first pieces of glass in the hot shop. So using all of these, Lonnie created found object sculpture. And this is what Lonnie does, and what Lonnie will do with these finished pieces of glass. He's going to use them to weave wires in and around them and attach tons of different found objects to these pieces of glass. Now, apparently, Lonnie's also going to be going over to Pilchuck after this residency, this is a glass school 2 hours north of us. And we frequently will have visiting artists that come from Pilchuck or that we send to Pilchuck afterwards so that they can continue to work with glass for as long as possible and continue that series of work. Yeah, Pilchuck. Yeah. I know the closed captioning is not it's not doing a great job today. Yeah, Lonnie wants to share his artwork with you all, so I know I've described this to you guys, but I'll pass it around and you guys can take a closer look at this. And there's a slideshow up on the screen showing off some previous works of Lonnie's as well that he doesn't have on display. But this kind of gives you an idea of what his works look like. So when we make cylinders or cones, we often will use this setup where we just have like a wooden board and some wet newspaper laid over top of it. And the idea is just to apply even pressure along the entire wall all at the same time to completely straighten it out. So we're just rolling it to make it straight, essentially. And then also that's kind of what we did earlier at the bench too. On the rollers, we were just getting it closer to the perfect cylindrical shape, and then the table setup with the board, that's to completely straighten it out, kind of perfect it. And it looks like we've brought over a marble that was created earlier, just a clear marble on the end of a pipe. We'll pop that off of the pipe and attach it to the side of the piece eventually. Now, when we do small scale work, like sculpting or when we're attaching something to another piece, you'll often see us using this smaller handheld torch. And this is the hottest item in the hot shop. This gets up to like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So it very quickly heats up a small section at a time, and this basically avoids warping or melting anything else on the piece, and it just allows us to attach things together. So we push that marble onto the surface of the piece. I imagine this could be used as an attachment point for wire or some other objects later on. Oh yeah, so while we're attaching things like this, you'll also see us using this fluffy torch. We're heating up other sections of the piece at the same time. I get lots of questions about this, so I thought I'd point out the reason we torch with that fluffy torch anywhere on the piece is just to apply a little bit of extra heat. So we're heating up areas that are cooling too quickly and have the chance of cracking in this case. Just keeping things warm. So we've attached a few marbles to the outside of this cylinder. This next one is going to be attached on the inside of the cylinder. And just a reminder, this piece is going to turn out yellow for the entire piece, and then we also have like an orange, green, and black design across the surface of it as well. So the areas that appear black on the piece, those are going to be black. The areas that seem a little bit different, but they kind of blend in, that's going to be the orange. And then the area that looks a little bit brown is going to be the green. Certain colors will change quite a bit when they're hot. That green will look brown. So this cone is actually based off the area's history. There's a little bit of a story behind it. And that story starts with what the area used to be used for, which was a lot of logging purposes. They would float logs down this waterway, and they had these wood burners shaped like these cones dotted along the waterway. They were called wigwam burners or beehive burners, and here's an example up on the screen. These would be used to burn the leftover wood scraps, and eventually when this area wasn't used as much for those purposes, they demolished the cones, they cleaned up the waterway, they built the Bridge of Glass and the Museum of Glass. And so to just kind of pay tribute to the area's history, we built this cone in the shape of one of those burners. And other than that, it's tilted on its side a bit to give us more floor space. And it's very flashy and very tall, just to be very flashy and very tall. Thank you. So at this point, we are preparing to break the piece off and put it away. We're torching that glass, connecting the piece to the pipe, and we'll torch this until we see a little bit of movement in that connection. Then we know it's safe to apply some water, like you're just about to see. This water will crack that connection, allowing us to just pop the piece right off with a tap of the pipe. So just like that, we are finished. And let's give them a round of applause. That is the third piece of the day. And off into the annealer it goes. This is where it'll slowly cool overnight to prevent thermal shock. So we'll see that piece again tomorrow. Hey, welcome into the hot shop, you guys. So we're going to be getting started on the next piece very soon here. Up in the front, we have our visiting artist. He's the one sitting and working on this sculpture right now. His name is Lonnie Holley. And these are mixed media sculptures using found objects. So apparently when Lonnie comes into a different environment, he will gather items from that environment, these found objects, and turn them into these sculptures. So this sculpture in particular here on the front pedestal was made this morning by Lonnie, and it's using found objects specifically from the hot shop. So this bag is filled with crushed glass. We have a piece of kiln brick from the inside of one of our ovens. We have this piece of newspaper, which we actually use to shape the glass at the bench. So all of these found objects brought together to create a finished piece. And you're welcome to take a closer look at these two pieces on the front pedestal, as well as this cylinder and this bowl that were made yesterday. And Lonnie's residency is going to run all the way through Sunday. We're going to see them make various blown pieces of glass that Lonnie will eventually turn into or use with his mixed media sculptures. So he's going to build upon these pieces of glass. So I know this looks kind of funky. We just blew out a bubble really thin, but this is eventually going to be broken off of the pipe and then broken into smaller pieces and used as essentially these shards of colored glass, I'm assuming. So to break it off, we use a little bit of water and just knock it off. Yeah, I want you guys to see this example right here. If you'd like to take a closer look, I'm allowed to pass these around. I don't think you're going to be able to reach it. Aha, there we go. Now you can reach it for sure. So this is a cup of glass that was blown yesterday, and there's a little piece of copper wiring that's like embedded in the face or attached to the surface of the glass. And they then applied a very thin bit of glass over top, probably from a bubble like this, and that is supposed to create kind of a saran wrap look. And so we're going to do something similar to that very soon. That's why we're preparing these bubbles. Did you want to? So this is the very beginning to any blown project. It's just a single small bubble of clear glass on the end of a blowpipe. We let it cool down in between each layer of clear that we gather. In this tank that we're going inside of, this is the glass furnace, sitting at just about 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. We have a large crucible just filled with clear molten glass. So we could pick up layer after layer, letting each layer cool down in between. And using a block to round and smooth this shape out. This block is carved out of a fruit wood, usually cherry wood, and kept in water to help prevent it from burning. And then I mentioned earlier the newspaper. So this is just a pad of newspaper that Ben has been using, and it's just folded up and then splashed with a little bit of water. That's all there is to it. And then with this bubble, we can start blowing this out into something like a cup. So once this bubble has been blown out and heated, This is then taken back to the bench, and we're doing a couple of really important things right now. We're using the two metal blades called the jacks, and we've kind of held on to the glass and pulled away from the pipe, stretching a neck. This can be done for vases and bottles. In my opinion, it's very, very satisfying. And we're blowing it out at the same time. And I don't know if I already pointed this out, but earlier we had our visiting artist Lonnie prepare some metal wire faces, you know, like that profile that's in the cup. We have a couple of those prepared and set aside, and we'll apply those to the surface of the glass eventually. And very importantly, this is always done with copper wire, because copper wire will heat up and cool down at the same rate as the glass and kind of expand and contract with the glass, which means that it's not going to break the glass. If we were to try to do this with steel, then it would just crack the glass surrounding it. Now, using these two corkwood paddles, we're flattening down the sides of this blown piece. And the reason we would use wood at all for any tool is sometimes we need an insulating material to touch to the glass, like in this case. It's going to allow the glass to hold its heat and not cause any warping or thermal shock in any sort of way. So now we have a nice blank slate to be able to apply our details to. And I know you guys joined in a little bit later in the explanation, but this is similar to what we're working on right now, where we're going to have like a copper wire kind of face profile applied to this piece. Yeah, that one was made yesterday. Yeah, you guys came in just as we were transferring the piece to a second pipe. So now we've basically finished the overall shape and the lower half of the piece for sure. Now we just fix up the top end of the piece, like the neck, and finish this piece off.